I don't aim to disappoint.
Quite a quick tongue. Is your sword arm as quick?
I'm about a little over 60 hours in the Crimson Desert now, and I keep coming back to the same feeling. This game just hooks you because it's the best bad game I've ever played. It's not the cleanest, it's not exactly what I would call tight, and yeah, parts of it are straight up busted. It does some dumb things, and then it can be just some weird ass kind of amazing. But somehow, none of that really slows it down. Because every time I sit down with it, something new happens. I'm not repeating the same loop over and over. It's constantly throwing new situations at me, new mechanics, new little surprises that keep things moving, and that's the part that's hard to ignore. I haven't been bored once. I haven't reached that moment that I get in every open world game where I just start going through the motions. Early on, Crimson Desert feels like it's doing a bit too much. You've got systems stacked on systems and ideas coming from every direction. However, nowadays, one of the big issues we have with games is cut content. You know, things that are separated and added later on as DLC, or $38 horse armor. Weirdly enough, Crimson Desert took the opposite approach. It almost feels like they didn't cut anything. Like they just said yes to every idea and pushed it into the game. At first, that's overwhelming. You don't really know what matters, what doesn't, or what you're even supposed to focus on. But after a while, it starts to settle. Not in a clean, organized way, but in a way where you begin to recognize how it all fits together. Sort of. That everything but the kitchen sink feeling slowly turns into something more deliberate, so you start to see patterns, even if they're a bit messy, and that's when the game really gets its grip on you. And from there, it just keeps going. You're chasing whatever the next moment is, because you know it's probably going to be something different from what you just did. One thing that really stands out after a while is how you're not just playing through the world, you're trying to figure out how the developers think. That sounds weird, right? But it's honestly what it feels like. You run into situations where your instincts don't help you at all. There's now a kind of infamous mechanic that most players have noticed. So you see a waterfall, you assume there's something behind it, so you try to walk through. No, not gonna happen. Get rolled. So obviously you tried 17 more times because you think it's a glitch, but no. So you start trying everything else. Maybe there's another entrance, maybe there's some ability you're missing. You spend time testing ideas that feel logical, and then the solution ends up being something completely illogical. You just have to use a charged combat move, hold the buttons, do that forward thrust attack, and that's what lets you pass through the water. That's not something you naturally think of. That's not how most games separate combat from exploration. Here, it's all mixed together. That kind of thinking shows up in puzzles too. A lot of them lean into physics in a way that isn't always obvious. You're lighting things on fire, moving objects around, trying to interact with systems that don't really explain themselves. Sometimes you get stuck, and when you finally see the solution, it feels almost absurd that that was the answer. But it sticks with you because of that. However, I have seen one example over Twitter, or X, or whatever you want to call it. That first puzzle in the abyss. There are tutorials telling you exactly what to do the whole way through. Plus a hologram literally showing you how to hit a certain spot. That one's just ridiculous. Sometimes I think players have gotten a bit too used to Ubisoft games that have tutorials for tutorials that then provide the answer with yellow panes and probably a microtransaction on top of that. Well, getting back to the point, there's also just how many mechanics you have access to at any given time. You tend to forget things. You're standing there thinking through a problem and suddenly remember you have some completely different ability you haven't used in hours. You try it and sometimes it actually works. That constant back and forth, trying something, failing, thinking again, pulling from a completely different part of your toolkit, that's where a lot of the discovery comes from. Even deep into the game, that feeling doesn't really go away. You're still figuring things out. Just with a bit more confidence than before. A lot of what keeps this game going is just the sheer number of moments where you just stop and think, what is actually happening right now? Not necessarily in a confused way, more of a, what kind of crazy shit am I going to be part of this time sort of way. There was this siege mission that stuck with me. You roll into this area and there are just soldiers everywhere, a full-on battle. You're cutting through groups, but at the same time you've got objectives layered on top of that. So you hit some towers, clearing some space around them, and then you're doing this whole mechanic where you focus your blade, set the base on fire, and then you're stuck there defending it while it slowly burns down. Now, in most games, that would be that. But Crimson Desert isn't most games, for better and for worse. And so the tower collapses, and suddenly all the enemies inside it drop right on top of you. Not in a scripted cutscene, physically. They just fall on you, splat. And they actually do damage. I mean, that makes sense, right? If 20 full-grown people fall on you in real life, then you should get hurt. It's just that most games don't even consider that sort of reality. Then it just escalates in a way that feels very physical, like the systems are actually interacting with each other instead of just triggering events. There are other moments that go in a completely different direction. I had one where I was on horseback in the dark, barely seeing anything, firing off these targeting arrows while artillery is coming in behind me. You tag something and a few seconds later the sky just lights up and everything gets wiped out. It looks insane, but it's all tied into actual gameplay systems. You're not just a bystander, you're literally part of the battle. You have to set these things up. And the scale doesn't really break either. You get into these fights where there are just absurd numbers of enemies on screen, and the game actually handles it quite well. I don't have the beefiest rig ever or anything like that, so it really surprised me. That's also where it starts to feel a bit like a Dynasty Warriors game, which could be a good or bad thing depending on your tastes. For me, it's kind of just dumb fun. A bit more intricate in Crimson Desert though, but you still carve through waves and waves of enemies while still juggling objectives. Even smaller moments hit in the same way. That unpredictability carries a lot of the experience. You don't really know what kind of situation you're walking into next, and because it's all playable, not just set pieces, it tends to really stick with you. What surprised me over time is how deep some of these systems actually go. At a glance, it's easy to assume everything is a bit surface level, because there's so much of it. But once you start digging into specific parts, there's more there than you'd expect. Take the camp, for example. It's not just a menu where you assign things and move on, you're actually recruiting people, sending them out on jobs, and then you can literally go and watch them carry these out. With a game with NPCs as dumb as they are, that bit really caught me off guard. You've got activities such as farming, livestock, even breeding animals. Then, there's literally a gate that leads straight into a butcher setup. You just process your meat right there. It's kind of brutal, also kind of funny, and very on brand for how this game handles things. Then there's the trade system. You can load up your goods, move them between locations, and build up money over time. It's not just a passive thing either, you're actually carrying out these tasks. That is, of course, if you actually want to. The cooking system is another one that sounds simple until you realize how much you rely on it. Especially because of the boss fights. A lot of those fights are rough, especially in the first 20 hours or so. And the way you get through them half the time is just stacking food. You go in loaded with meat skewers and you're basically eating through the fight while getting hit constantly. It's kind of ridiculous. You end up looking like this unstoppable warrior who's also just constantly snacking mid-combat to survive. But behind that, there's actual depth. You learn different recipes and materials, having to go out and gather what you need. Same with upgrading gear. You're not just picking up a better weapon and moving on. You've got to explore and find specific ores, going to the right places, slowly improving what you have. The progression feels gradual, which makes it more satisfying when it finally clicks. Even the loot stands out more because it's not constantly thrown at you. When you find something, it actually feels like something new. Sometimes it's tied to a boss. Sometimes it has a specific ability that you saw used against you earlier, and now it's yours. And a lot of times, they just look cool. I can't stress enough how important it is to make your character look cool in a game. Or dumb, or crazy, or funny, or whatever you want, but you should always have these options. And the combat ties all of this together. You can keep it simple and just push through, or you can actually engage with everything. Different weapons, unarmed combat, bows, all of it. There's enough there to experiment if you want to, and the game doesn't really punish you for playing around with it. Again, it's messy, no question. Some systems are clearly stronger than others, but when you step back and look at how much is actually there, and how much of it you can interact with in a meaningful way, it starts to make more sense why the game feels the way it does. So with all that said and done, here come the boss fights. Okay, so many of these are incredible and cinematic in a way. But this is also where things start to fall apart a bit. You've got this combat that works great when you're in a frenzy, just cutting through groups of weaklings, constantly moving and dodging, using every tool at your disposal. All that stuff is great. Then the game pulls you into a boss fight, and suddenly it tightens everything up, and it just doesn't feel right. The enemy's jumping around, teleporting, flipping the camera all over the place, and you're stuck trying to keep up with something that doesn't match how the rest of the game plays.
You don't get to decide that.
I'm sort of used to it by now, and the bosses can be fun. But before they patched it, it was kind of ridiculous. You'd walk in loaded with food and already know how it was gonna go. You'd be mid-fight getting hit over and over again, just cycling through sun-fried meat rectangle after rectangle, just to stay alive. The whole process of swing, eat, get hit, eat again, it was more like you were just trying to survive rather than master the boss fight. After the nerfs, it's not nearly as punishing. The difference is obvious pretty quickly. You're not getting erased instantly anymore and fights feel a bit more manageable. But even then, they still don't really match the rest of the game. The camera still struggles, especially when enemies start moving around too much, and that lock-on just gives up at times. It's strange because right outside of these fights, everything flows. You're back to handling groups, using different abilities, experimenting again. Then you hit a boss and it's like the game switches rules on you. The funny part is, even with that, it doesn't really kill the momentum. You come out of one of those fights, maybe a bit annoyed, and then you're right back into something completely different. You're back at the camp checking on your people, or you're out gathering materials, or you just pick a random direction and start moving. And within a few minutes, you're onto something new. Some random encounters, some weird mechanic you forgot about, some area that you didn't expect to find with pterodactyl airplanes. Yeah, that's a thing, by the way. There's always something else ready to pull you away from whatever just frustrated you. That's what carried it for me this whole time. Even when one part doesn't land, there's another part right behind it that keeps things going. You're never stuck in one loop long enough for it to drag everything else down. So yeah, just 64 hours in, I still can't stick to a plan in this game. I'll start it up thinking I'm going to focus on one thing, wrap something up, be efficient for once, and within 10 minutes I'm off somewhere else doing something completely different. And it just keeps happening. One thing pulls you into the next, and before you realize it, a couple of hours are gone and you didn't do what you originally set out to do. But you still feel like you got something out of it. All in all, still a fun, stupid, but very fun game. And well, if you've been playing it, I'd love to know how it's been going for you, especially once you got deeper into it. How do you feel about the recent updates? Pretty good, right? I think that's all from my end. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like, it really does help. Subscribe if you want more of this, and hit notifications so you don't miss the next vid. Either way, thanks for watching, and have a great one.
Why did you kill my swordmaster?
Why? Does anyone need a reason to kill?